What's up, guys? It's been a really long time, but welcome back to another episode of the Unplanned chat series where we keep things real and unscripted. How this is going to go is that we're just going to have a normal conversation. We're going to chat. I'm going to ask Ryan some questions, and you guys are going to get to know Ryan. And if you don't know me, you're going to get to know a little bit about me as well. So, yeah, I know Ryan from EuroNASCAR because that's where I competed last year. And I was looking to interview him in Oschersleben, but I didn't have a really good weekend. So, yeah, I didn't really find time to do that. But yeah, Ryan, how you doing, man? And thank you for taking the time to be on my podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, man. Yeah, I know we've been trying to do this for like a minute. So just glad we are able to make it work and finally get a hold of each other. So it's cool to finally like meet more Euro NASCAR people. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
That's been the coolest thing to me about doing all this.
For me, it's also cool to meet someone that actually comes from America, and
Hmm.
that's raced in NASCAR there in the Xfinity Series and in the Truck Series,
Yeah.
because that's also something I'm looking to do. But of course, it's difficult with all things with talent and with budget and all the
Hmm.
other things that come together with racing. But how did you get to Euro NASCAR? What really sparked that? Because you were there, I think, for the first time in Oschersleben. So
Hmm.
what kind of sparked that idea of let's compete in EuroNASCAR and see how that goes.
So I always wanted to race internationally. Like I actually got my passport. Ironically, last year was the first year I've had a passport, and I got it specifically to race internationally. I didn't care what it was. I just
Wow.
wanted to race international. And so um, I talked to numerous people who ran Euro NASCAR. Actually, my roommate, Myatt Snyder, ran Euro NASCAR back in 2018. And so like I've always been familiar with it, but I just didn't know enough about it to make that jump into doing it. Like you mentioned, I raced Xfinity and trucks for a while, and I've been doing that now since 2019, racing Xfinity and trucks, and I love doing it. I love what I do. I love being able to be in the position that I'm in to go and do those races. But I did go into this year, and unfortunately, my partners at Critical Path Security came to me and we were like, "Look, what do we want to do? Like, what's the goal?" And I looked at everything that we've been doing, and I kind of realized it was going to be it was just going to be another year of part-time Xfinity or a truck. And I've been doing part-time Xfinity or truck for the last few years now. And when you're first starting out, it's incredible. It's good. But after a couple of years, it's kind of like, okay, is that going to move that needle forward for me as a race car driver, as an athlete, as a business person? And the answer in my mind was a resounding no. And so I had to basically reevaluate what my plans were. And I just kind of was like, you know what, let's just go full time in Euro NASCAR. There's no sense in trying to do the same song and dance for the fifth year. Let's go out and chase a title, chase a good points finish, chase podiums, top fives. Maybe I could screw around hard enough and get a win. Who knows? With how crazy some of these races go, you never know. But at the end of the day, too, it's also making me a better driver. I'm not a road racing guy by trade, so it's definitely interesting for sure.
That sounds awesome, and I find it really cool that you want to try out some road racing. I know there's a lot of NASCAR fans that are like purely oval fans that are like
Mhm.
screw road racing. We want more oval, and I know
Yeah.
that in Europe there's a lot of people that say screw oval. We want more road racing. So I really like the fact that you're super open to that. Because I feel like that just makes you a better driver and a better person just
Yeah.
in general. So that's absolutely amazing, and I definitely think you can fight for a title. I think that's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Might take a year or two of getting in there and like figuring out the car. But I don't know. You tell me. What are the differences between the Xfinity Series car and the EuroNASCAR just in general? What was that like? I only know the EuroNASCAR, and I can't imagine what the other cars in the US are like.
Yeah, so the biggest thing to me, right off the bat, is the two biggest things that I noticed was overall. I guess you could say the overall frame slash build of the race car, how the suspension is, how the chassis is. It's all road racing, centric, right? Like that car is made to specifically drive on road courses, and that's something that I'm not used to on the state side, right? In the states, it's like, oh, if you keep the thing on track, you'll have a good race. I mean, I remember running Mid Ohio back in 2021, and I literally on a green white checkered waved several cars by me, like, go ahead and pass me, I don't care. And then I passed them all back a lap later because they all crashed. So like you have cars that don't run good on road courses, and now I go to EuroNASCAR. Now it's the same philosophy. It's the same philosophy in terms of driving style, because it is a stock car. It still doesn't have those assists, doesn't have ABS or traction control, but at the same time, it is built for road racing, so you're able to drive it a lot harder. And being able to drive it a lot harder also comes down to the fact that the cars don't have as much horsepower. I think they said the EuroNASCAR cars pump out 450 or something along those
Yep.
lines.
Around about 400, 450.
Yeah, so that's a that's a big jump from the 670 that I'm used to in Xfinity and trucks, right? So, it's a bit of a jump there, but you also have to think those cars and trucks are a lot heavier than the EuroNASCAR cars. Than the EuroNASCAR cars, I mean, from I don't know the exact weight, because they always say them in kilos, and I don't know what the heck a kilo is. But it's from what I know, it's a lot lighter. The cars are much lighter, more agile, and so it's got the same stock car philosophy. Like if you're good in I say I've said this very publicly. I've said if you take a top 5 NASCAR Euro Series driver, you put them in a bad Xfinity car, they'll be able to put it in the show. If you put them in a really good Xfinity car, they'll contend for a top 5. That's just, in my opinion, how the competition is, and how I think that's how I think it'll translate.
That's awesome. And I personally also feel like the level in your NASCAR is pretty high.
Mhm.
Like I had my first season last year and I was struggling to really get top positions, right? So the
Mhm.
level is really high. And even though the cars are quote unquote extremely simple, the level of nuance you need as a driver to
Mhm.
actually have it on the limit at every single stage of the lap is immense, right? And
Yep.
it takes not just a lot of talent, but a lot of practice and a lot of time to kind
Mhm.
of figure out all those nuances and actually push the vehicle to the limit. And I find it quite amazing that you mentioned that it's so similar, because I would have expected it to be a bit more different. But I mean, at the end of the
Mhm.
day, you're right. They're all stock cars, except for these are, yeah, definitely made
Yeah.
for a bit more road racing. And
Mhm.
yeah, I can't imagine what the differences are. I've personally been looking to race on an oval. Super
Mhm.
interested in late models,
You get to do
but
it
yeah,
next month. You get to do it next month in Venray.
yeah, definitely. That's if I get the budget done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, but it's I can't stress enough how you know while the cars are very different in their own right, the cars the overall build of them are very different. At the same time, it still has that same philosophy, like I said. But you know now the interesting thing to me is we mentioned Venray, right? Like these are road racing stock cars. They're not NASCAR stock cars. You know what I mean? I get, well, they are NASCAR stock cars, but you know what I mean? Like they're not
Yeah,
oval stock cars,
I
right?
know what you mean.
So now you take a road racing stock car and put it on an oval. How's that going to race? So it's funny. I've had a lot of people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, you got that one." And I was like, "I don't know, man. Like it's a different car. Like you got to learn it." And my confidence is higher for like the oval, but at the same time, it's like I don't know how this thing will drive. So um, it'll be interesting to say the least. But yeah, highly recommend getting in some ovals.
Definitely. I mean, I've tried it in the sim, but it's. I mean, the sims are pretty realistic, but it's just still not the real thing. Like we don't even
No.
have to argue about it. And
Yeah.
yeah, just real life oval racing seems to be something that's pretty fun. I watch it more than I ever thought I would. I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of got into racing through Formula One. Of course,
Mhm.
you know growing up in Europe, that's just what you see more often, and IndyCar and NASCAR is just kind of you don't really see it all that much. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually like pretty interesting and pretty hardcore and way more difficult than you initially think, right? So
Hmm.
I'm super interested in oval racing, and I can't wait to see how it goes. I hope I can race in Venray, but
Yeah.
as we both know as drivers, budget is sometimes an issue, and
Huge.
that's what I'm currently struggling with.
Yep.
But yeah, if I get to race in Venray, I can't wait to see what it's like, because of course late models they're made like asymmetrically, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So definitely it'll be quite a challenge to race a normal kind of road course vehicle in an oval. But just how did you get into oval racing and into stock car racing in general? Did you also start with late models, or how did you start? I saw online that you raced bandoleros. So
Yep.
just kind of maybe explain what those things are and how you got into the sport.
Yeah, so I started kind of late, I guess you could say, for what a for a racing driver, a lot of drivers start when they're 5, 6, 7, or 8. I started when I was 11, almost 12. Started in Bandoleros, raced those for about 3 years. Got the California state title 3 years in a row, tied for the national title, won several dozen races. By the time I turned 14, I moved into a street stock, which is it's kind of like a local type series for each racetrack. My car was a 1973 Camaro, which was it was a badass race car. It
Sounds
was
awesome, man.
awesome. Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, it's so heavy and underpowered. It's just a pig, but it's like if you drive it with finesse, you actually can really make up a lot of time. And that's I say all the time. It's like that car is fundamentally not good. It's not a performance type race car, but it made me learn how to maximize momentum, speed, and all that, and it made me a better driver. And so that by the time I moved up to late models when I was 15, 16 years old, um, I felt a lot more comfortable behind the wheel. I was able to go out and be competitive. Spent 2 years in late models before moving into ARCA East. Ran that for a season. Admittedly, wasn't as prepared as I needed to be. I was 17 years old, racing on tracks that are beyond my comprehension at the time, and did some more late model stuff. Jumped into Xfinity when I was 18. Did my first Xfinity start with JD Motorsports, and that set the domino effect, right? Got that first start in, had a decent day, showed that I can do it. And I mean, I'm sure you kind of can relate, as a driver, once you do that first race and once you kind of get those laps under your belt, the more it comes to you, I guess you could
Definitely,
say. And so that
definitely.
was kind of how things have been over the last few years.
That sounds awesome. I also had a really late start, so I can relate. Probably a little bit later. I mean, I started racing in summer of 2021,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I
Wow.
started with go karting, yeah, and
Heck yeah.
I transitioned from sim racing to real racing. So
Okay.
for me it's been quite the journey because it is somewhat different, but you can apply the skills you learn in the
Yeah,
sim to the real world. So I
absolutely.
can definitely kind of relate to the late start, and I think it's super awesome that you've made it so far. That you've made to the Xfinity series and to the Truck series and to the Euro series. I find that absolutely amazing. And Xfinity series and something like that is just it's stuff I still dream of nowadays, and,
Yeah.
and I hope I'll be able to achieve it. In due
Yeah,
course or in the next few years or whatever. Who knows what God has in store? But
absolutely.
yeah, that sounds absolutely awesome. And what was it like transitioning to late models? Was that like a difficult transition to do, or was that relatively simple?
It was relatively simple in its own way, because of the fact that obviously I grew up oval racing, right? So it wasn't anything that was like obscenely crazy to me. I think the biggest adjustment for myself was just the difference in speed. I mean, I went from running a beefy underpowered street stock to now a late model that had you know the power to weight ratio was a lot better, right? It had a little bit more power than the street stock, I guess you could say, probably about 100 something more horsepower, maybe more. But it had probably 1,000 less pounds on it. So you have a car that's gonna fly down the straightaways and fly through the corners. And I remember my first race, I did like a fishtail all the way down the straightaway and eventually spun out. Like it was
Dang.
embarrassing. But at the end of the as the races went on, as time went on, I got more and more comfortable. And by the time we got to, I'd say, the mid portion of my second season in late models, that's when we were able to show up to the racetrack and know we were going to leave with a P3 or better every race, and that was a really good feeling.
I can imagine that probably feels like absolutely amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want to go back to what you said earlier with the racing a kind of pig-like car
Yeah.
helped you learn a lot. And I think that's absolutely like I can relate to that 100% because I got into racing in the BMW 316 Ti Cup,
Oh, there you go. Yep.
which is like this cup where they race E36 compact. I think you've probably heard of it before. Jill
I've
Inster's
seen it.
raced in it.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Pretty much these cars are underpowered AF. Like they have, I think, max 140 horsepower if you've got a
Yeah.
good engine under the hood. And at the end of the day, they weigh I think 100 kilos more than the EuroNASCAR, which is
Oh
like
wow.
1,200 kilo. I think the
Yeah.
EuroNASCAR weighs. I'm not quite sure.
Something like
And
that.
yeah, for you it's probably difficult to relate to kilos. For me, it's
Yeah.
difficult to relate to pounds.
Yeah. What
So
is that in
I
cheeseburger
guess
units? What is that in cheeseburgers? I don't know.
I got no clue. Like
Yeah.
25 bald eagles or something.
Yeah. Probably.
It's
but
always
yeah.
difficult.
But driving those underpowered cars, driving something that's a little heavy, driving something that's not made to go fast is what makes a driver do a lot better. And I think and that's where I think, you know, it helped me out a lot when I made that transition. I apply the lessons I learned running street stocks to my Xfinity races, and I apply that to when I go run EuroNASCAR. Like, even though I'm driving a car that has a lot more power than that, and a lot less weight, it's still the fundamentals. And I tell young drivers all the time, because out there it's a lot different. Go in the road racing scene. There's a different path, but a lot of drivers out here, they'll go from bandoleros to legends cars, and legends cars are incredible race cars. I think that they are absolutely, the one of the craziest vehicles you could drive, and I think that they are a fundamental, thing to learn. Unfortunately, they do come with a little bit of an expense, and it's hard to be competitive. And so when we made that transition from out of bandoleros, I looked at my family and we kind of got to talking, and it was like, look, if we go run a street stock, we'll spend a third of what we would doing a Legends car. So instead of running that, I'm finally getting full body, full size stock car experience. And that's not me talking bad about Legends cars. I love Legends cars. I think that they're a phenomenal racing series for any young drivers to develop. But I am also a very vocal, I guess you could say, supporter of, hey, if you can't do Legends cars, if it's not in the cards, I think a street stock or something along those lines is a viable option for a young driver, because everybody's path's different. So
Definitely, and I have to 100% agree with what you said. Racing a car that was not meant for racing, it definitely helps you develop your driving skills. And that's the same thing that I felt racing in the TI Cup. Of course, it's not
Mhm.
oval racing, but it's kind of like a parallel world, I
Yeah,
guess you can
yeah,
say, where you're just getting into really low powered cars that are sluggish and a bit difficult to drive, but it's extremely challenging. And I feel like that challenge of driving that car really prepares you for the moment that you get into an actual real race car, and that's where you really apply your skills. I remember the first time I tested the EuroNASCAR in Fontenay, it was like a blessing to drive that thing,
yeah.
because I described it to my dad as textbook driving compared to the
Hmm.
218 Ti,
Yeah,
because you kind of had this image in your head as a racing driver, what a race car is supposed to feel like when it's
yep.
actually balanced and set up well, and that's exactly what the EuroNASCAR felt like to me. And yeah, it was just this completely new world, and it just pulled me in, because before that I wasn't really like much into stock car racing. Right,
Yeah,
I was curious about it. I've heard of it. I tried it with a buddy in iRacing who was my
yeah.
past teammate, and he had a sim rig, and I tried it there. But at the end of the day, it wasn't something that was really that big into. But after I tested the car, I was like, "Whoa, this is awesome, right?"
Yeah.
And then you kind of start falling down the rabbit hole, and
Yep.
you're not just a driver, but you're a fan as well.
Well, it's funny you say that, because now that I've done road racing over in Europe, now I've fallen down the rabbit hole of GT Masters, GT3 racing out there. Like, I've DTM, like, following all that. Like, I knew of it. You know what I mean? Like, you know of all this stuff racing. Being just in racing. But once you're out there, like, I had the great opportunity to go visit Land Motorsport out in Germany, and I got to go check out their cars, and it's just so neat seeing how different a race team in like a GT Masters philosophy is versus a NASCAR Xfinity. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting seeing differences and stuff. And I'm a geek for this kind of stuff. I love seeing the technology that goes into it and all that.
Definitely, it's absolutely amazing, and it's just two completely different worlds. Like the GT3 and GT4 cars are like a completely different concept compared to like a stock car.
Yeah,
So it's probably like super different. Like, I can't imagine what it's like to just kind of be there in an American like NASCAR team and just kind of like chill for a weekend and see how everything works. Like,
yeah,
it's probably completely different to how I know it. Just being a European person. And yeah, I can't imagine how different it is. I mean, initially I was looking to test GT4s, but what
mm,
really brought me to your NASCAR was just the raw and pure nature. Like,
yep,
GT4 is kind of cool, but like, what
yep.
is your opinion on the whole entire driving aids aspect? Because that's still somewhat of a controversy nowadays.
So I mean, uh, it's an interesting, I guess you could say, conversation, because every racing series has their own thing, right? And as a driver, it's your job to learn how to drive around, whether it's drive around the aids or the lack thereof. And so for me, I think like I am used to driving cars without aids. I'm used to driving the Xfinity cars and the trucks and the EuroNASCARs, these type of cars that, don't have those aids, right? So you have to learn how to ring yourself in or push harder or whatever it is, right? Versus someone who's grown up running doing road racing, going down that GT ladder. You learn these habits to drive around the aids, and so I think in both ways they're challenging. Like I don't think if you put me in a car with ABS and traction control, I don't think I'd be fast. Not because it's like mainly. Sorry, I'm trying to like English. Mainly because of the fact that it's not something I'm used to. But then you take vice versa. You take somebody who's used to ABS and traction control, put them in a EuroNASCAR or an Xfinity car or a truck, and they might be a little lost for a little while. So I mean, it's a catch-22, right? So I'm indifferent either or. I don't have like a strong opinion either way. I think that there's things that are better about each, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's quite an interesting take because usually people side on one end or on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say that's actually quite a fair take because at the end of the day, like I've never thought of it that way either. Like I can't imagine what it would be like for me to drive a car with like driving aids because even in the sim when I
Mm-hmm.
race a GT3, be it on the Nordschleife or on a normal circuit, I'm always racing with the aids off. Right,
Yeah.
like I'm like, who cares? Aids off. This is how I know it, and I also don't know cars with with driving aids. The only thing I've been able to experience in the past is ABS and the TI Cup because it was just stock in those cars.
Yeah.
But other than that, you had ESP and traction control and all that type of stuff off as well. And I came from karting before that, so
Yeah.
that's all I really know. I only know driving without driving aids, and that's kind of a similarity, I guess. Have you ever tried karting by any chance, or is that something?
No. Yeah,
Never.
no, there wasn't much, there is a pretty good karting scene out in Southern California. They had Cal Speed for a while. And there's a couple other, tracks that are kind of coming out of the woodworks now. There's quite a few options, but it just never was on the radar. I mean, to be honest with you, I was just a racing fan my whole life. I always, watched race cars. I always watched monster trucks, NASCAR, off-road racing, whatever it may be. I just liked four wheels and a motor. And literally the only reason why I found out that kids could even drive race cars was because I went to a local short track and saw Bandolero cars, and it just so happened that one of my recess aides from my elementary school was there with her son who was racing, and they were planning on getting out of it, and so like I immediately was like, I want to try this, like let's do this, and so I kind of bypassed carts unintentionally because that's just I didn't even really know the existence of competitive go karting.
That's actually crazy. Like
Yeah.
that is a completely different take because in Europe, you want to become a racing driver? Yeah, I want to become a racing driver. Go karting. Like
Yeah.
it's the go-to thing. Like everyone's just like, oh, go karting. And
Yep.
I remember when I got into racing, I did half a season in karting,
Mhm.
and then after that, I stepped into touring car racing. And people were calling me nuts because they were like, yo, you haven't even done like a full-on season in karting. You want to get into car racing? Like you're you're gonna be missing all that experience and all that stuff. Where I always made the argument and said, if you're a good driver, then you can drive anything well. And
Mhm.
point number two, I come from sim racing, and
Yep.
so that there's probably like a greater similarity than karting to a road car. And at the end of the day, a good karting driver might have more experience in an actual racing scenario than me. That's
Yeah.
like a fact. But at the end of the day, when it comes to actually handling the car on circuit, they'll be starting at zero right where I'm starting at zero, right?
Yep.
Or at least they might be starting at 10% when I'm starting at zero. So
Yeah.
there's like a better chance of me getting in there. And so I also kind of sort of bypassed karts. I did half a season. I was like, I'm getting into touring car racing. But
Yeah.
for us Europeans, it's absolutely crazy. Like I've only like heard of bandoleros like probably a few months ago. I didn't even know those things existed.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to send someone from Europe over to the States and just bring into a track of people racing bandoleros, they would be scratching their head going, whoa, this actually exists?
Yeah.
Like this is possible?
Yeah.
Because to us, it's just so bizarre. Like we're just used to karting, race car, and then that's it, right?
Yeah. And a lot of kids do start in karting here, and like a lot of people don't go the oval route. It's also just that difference in culture in terms of racing. Like here, it's NASCAR. You know what I mean? It's NASCAR, NASCAR, NASCAR. That's NASCAR reigns supreme out here. So there's you could do a stone's throw here in North Carolina, and it'll land at a short track, right? That's just how it
Mm.
is. Versus over in Europe, it's all road racing, all road racing. There's a couple ovals, there's a couple good ovals, but other than that, there's no ladder system to do oval racing out there. There's no set oval series out there other than some of the stuff you see at Venray. And I'm sure there's others that I'm totally missing, but in terms of those that are in the public consciousness, there's not really many oval series.
Definitely, yeah. It's kind of like in America, the oval racing is more like what you imagine when it comes to racing, and in Europe, it's more like road course racing. Like I think if I were to go to the U.S. and just ask a random person on the street what is racing, they'd be like, "Oh, it's a bunch of cars going in circles."
Mm-hmm.
And if I ask someone in Germany what is racing, oh, it's a bunch of cars racing on a racetrack, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like the stereotype of what racing actually is so different because
Absolutely.
of the fact that road racing is more common in Europe and oval racing is more common in the States, pretty much. I think it's quite an interesting difference, and that's why for me, like, oval racing is just it's kind of a new taste, and
Yeah.
it's a breath of fresh air because I'm just used to all of this turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, and then in the US you only got turn left, and
Yeah.
then you try turning left and you figure out it's not that easy to turn left fast.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like so many people have the false, idea in their head that like, oh yeah, it's just an oval. It's two corners, like that's it. But in reality, say you're going to a bigger some of these ovals, it's like okay, you have to hit that same mark every lap. You have to be able to adjust your line. Okay, the bottom isn't working. Time to move to the top lane. Like in road racing, there's no moving your lane. There's just hit the marks. You know what I mean? And then also it's like, okay, what kind of movements can I do on the wheel to find speed? Okay, how do I work the pedals to find speed? Do I need to drag the brake to get the nose down on the bump springs or the packers, right? There's no such thing as bump springs or packers in Europe. It's just racing. So there's so many fine details between each racing, and they're both unique in their own right. That's I'm experiencing the same thing you are, just vice versa. I'm learning more about road racing and becoming more interested in that because it's so new to me, right? And I've been able to work with some really great people out here in the States, like Andy Lally, Spencer Pumpelly. Get to learn from guys like them about road racing, about GT3 racing and stuff like that. I have a big fascination with GT3 racing, but in the same time, it's like they will sit here like over and over and say oval racing is entirely difficult to me versus me, I would say road racing is difficult to me. So it's like to every driver, it's just a different experience.
Definitely, and I feel like we need more of that in EuroNASCAR. I feel like it would be absolutely amazing to have more people from the States race in Europe, and to just have like this sort of mix in the driver lineup, because then you're really making things interesting with the road course racing, and if we get more ovals in with the oval racing, right? Because then you can really see how the two worlds are different, and you kind of have this sort of cross pollination between the two worlds, and I think that's super healthy for the racing world, and that's probably like one of the most interesting things out there, which is why I feel like EuroNASCAR is a super interesting championship, because we only know like GT3 and all type of stuff, and this is completely different. But like, how do you set up an oval car? Because I can imagine like racing in the Xfinity series, right? You guys race on kind of larger ovals than we have in Europe, let's just say. And there's probably quite a lot of nuances that I don't know about when it comes to setting up the car. I can imagine, when you're drafting behind the car constantly, that affects the engine temperature differently, right? So how do you guys set up a car, and what are the differences in setup there that you've just kind of discovered now?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is just, overall suspension and the way you build the car from the ground up, right? Obviously things are more offset to the left, right? So you have, the weight shifted over to the left, it's less even on both sides. Then you have the tires, right? Okay, you're going to run, 12 pounds of pressure on the lefts and 25 on the rights, right? You're just going to have that different type of stagger, right? You're going to put your biggest on the right rear or the right front and vice versa. You're going to have different things to try and set the car up for the corner. Okay, you're going to run a bigger spring in the right rear. You're going to run a heavier spring. Like say you go and run a 1500 right rear spring and a 30 like a I don't know. I'm just naming things, but like you'll run a smaller spring in the left rear, like a 700 or something like that, right? Like you're just going to run different things. Now, actually, that's a little too little of a split. I'd say like 350. That's too little of a split. Too little split will make the car too tight. By the way, we talk tight and loose here. No understeer and oversteer here. I remember I was sitting in the car in Osserschleben and I was like, man, the car is just really tight through turn 3, and they're looking at me and I'm like, understeer. It's understeery. Like I had to think about it. But it's all those things. Then you mentioned drafting, right? Okay, now you're at a super speedway, right? So now you're hardly even setting the thing up to really handle. You're setting it up to just go fast in a straight line. So now you're building the thing to have as little friction as it possibly can. So I mean, there's so many fine details that go into these cars to make them drive better at these types of tracks, and each track in their own right is different. So like you can go to Daytona and Talladega. Well, Daytona is a bit of a tighter track. There, you're kind of loaded up in the corner a little bit more. It's, the corners are much more narrow than Talladega. So the way you have to race those tracks are a little different. They're both speedways, but you have to drive them different. You're not going to go to Texas Motor Speedway the same way you go to Charlotte. Every track is so different in their own right. So, that's one of the things too that a lot of people don't realize is like, yeah, they're ovals, but every track handles insanely different. And that's really fun to try and learn and get the handle of.
Yeah, definitely. And I can imagine that most ovals, like the corners are probably not identical, right? Like you might have ovals where there's two corners, quote unquote, but one corner is like a bit tighter than the other. Is that usually the case, or?
Yeah. I mean, usually, heck, even Bristol, the one that everybody looks at and is like, oh, that's perfect oval. It's like, nope. Turn 3 and 4 is tighter. You have to put more wheel in there. So I mean, it's like you don't realize these things, but it's what makes oval racing that much of a challenge. I name Texas all the time because it's probably the most radical one. But I mean, it's you have one corner that's 12 degrees or whatever amount of banking it is, however little it has, versus turn 3 and 4 has 25, 26 degrees of banking, and they're both very narrow grooves. So how do you find speed? Right? Everybody's running the bottom lane. All right, are you going to be the one ballsy enough to jump up half a lane? Cool. Did you jump up too far? Congratulations, you hit the wall. And that's the other thing too. It's there's no room for error over there. You mess up in your NASCAR or any road racing, 9 times out of 10 there's a runoff area. You can gather back up out of the sand trap or the grass or the gravel, whatever it may be, and continue on your merry way. In oval racing, there's a wall there, so good luck. So it's different. It's a totally different philosophy. Both crazy in their own rights. Like it was crazy to me to think that like you could spin out and then like just get back going in road racing. So yeah,
that's definitely a contrast. Just right out of the bat, do you think you need more balls to race in oval? Because that's like my personal feeling. Like I'm intimidated by ovals because, as you mentioned, spin off and it's like whatever. You're back in the game. Keep going. Like it's fine. You got all 3 wheels on the car. Screw that one wheel that left it. You can keep racing, right?
Yeah.
But on an oval, I mean, I've noticed this in the sim, right? And I'm getting one corner better than the other, and wondering why am I getting into this corner better than the other one? Aren't they supposed to be identical? And then you make 1 or 2 mistakes, and you're like, oh, I just scraped the wall. Oh, I just damaged my suspension. Oh, I just did this and that, right?
Yep.
So I feel like the room for error is probably more close to rallying than to actual road core racing in terms of like the amount of room for error that you have.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of sketchiness, I would give it to ovals, except for certain road racing tracks, right? You look at the Nordschleife or Spa. Some tracks are definitely more intimidating than others, but and as a racing driver, you have to be honest with yourself and say when you're nervous. And I won't lie to you, I get nervous before anytime I strap in a race car because I want to do good and I also want to perform and I don't want to make an ass out of myself.
Agreed.
But in oval racing, right, you're going into the corner at some of these tracks at 185, 190, 195 miles per hour. So I don't know what that is in kilometers per hour. But you're hauling going into these corners, and you have to hope that your car is going to catch you. And sometimes it's not even the car that catches you, it's the air that's deflecting off the side of your race car because you drive at a state of yaw going through the corners, yaw, like sliding through the corner. So it's like there's so many factors that keep you going in the right direction in on some of these ovals. So some of these ovals, I would admit, are sketchier than others. Like, we just raced at Dover this past week in the Cup Series. I would challenge anybody to go around that place and tell me that it ain't sketchy. I mean, it is a sketchy racetrack, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the sketchiest racetracks are the most fun.
Yeah.
Like, in the sim, I have the most fun on sketchy tracks, which is the reason that, when I do decide to race road course in the sim, I don't gravitate towards quote unquote normal circuits, but I go instantly to the normal track because I'm like, who cares? There's no runoff here. This is where I'm actually like testing myself and actually improving because I'm putting myself in a situation where I can't have room for error like at all. Because if I do make a mistake, I'm in the wall. I mean, may have a little bit of grass to like catch it off, but the chance of catching it off on a little bit of grass when you're speeding through there at I don't know how many kilometers per hour is quite low. And probably in real life, it requires even more and more balls. Like, well, it's immensely difficult.
And the other thing is the way you drive each oval is different. There's some tracks where I'll name one off the bat. Homestead Miami Speedway. Your job is to get as close as you possibly can to the wall throughout the corner. So now you're going 170 through the corner, and you're no more than this far off the wall, turning, going 170 or whatever it may be, 160, whatever. Like,
make a mistake, you're in there.
Make a mistake, you're touching it. The beautiful thing is like to most people that's crazy. I couldn't do that. To us, it's like, oh, if we hit the wall, at least it's a soft hit because we don't have to go far. So it's different.
Definitely very different. I mean, at the end of the day, if you screw up on a road circuit, you're taking a lot of speed into the wall, right? Yeah. I mean, sure, you are as well on ovals, but I guess when you're super close to the wall, as you just mentioned, the touch is probably quite as soft. When compared to probably hurtling yourself at some tire bang in the middle of Nordschleife. Mm-hmm. I've seen some crash compilations where I was like,
who hasn't?
Yeah, like there's just that one YouTube corner where you see so many weird compilations of like wheels flying off and people like I don't know what they do on the Nordschleife, but yeah, it's just Touristenfahrten, I guess.
I will tell you the craziest thing about being having been in NASCAR now for a couple of years is seeing yourself in a crash compilation. That is a thing. That is an experience. Because I grew up watching crash compilations I grew up in the age of YouTube, right? So you're looking up crash compilations online, and every so often I'll have one recommended on my feed. I'm like, oh, let me look at it, and then like a couple clips in, it's like, oh, there's the big one. No, there's me. I remember this race. Like it's an interesting feeling, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't happened to me yet, which is good. But also a guilty pleasure of mine is just go and watch crash compilations, which is kind of like, I mean, why do I want to watch people fail badly and hit the wall? Like, this is something that I wouldn't wish for myself, but for some reason it's just kind of fun to watch. Like, I remember like back in high school, I'd sit there when I was bored at like lunchtime, and we would just like search up Touristenfahrt crash compilations, just some random stuff, right? And it was just like these huge compilations of just like random accidents that are like bonkers, where they're like, yo, look at this. But then nowadays you think of it and you're like, dang, like those people probably had a tough time in those cars, eh? Like it ain't easy when you come into an accident. And luckily, I've only had like small accidents. Like most of them hurt my ego more than my body.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. Usually, very rarely do you have ones that actually hurt you. Thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. I mean, I'd say probably 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't really the case.
Nah.
But yeah, that's the main reason I kind of shied off from the interview in Oschersleben, because I don't know if you followed my race at all.
But you were in Euro 2, right?
Yeah, Euro 2. I had 2 super bad races.
Oh, like, no.
Really, like the first one wasn't even intentional, even though it looked intentional. So you know how the first corner of Oschersleben is like you run out really far, you hit a super late apex?
Yep.
So my teammate was like right next to me.
Oh
And
no.
this guy goes out, takes the normal ideal racing line, and I'm there, and I just see a huge gap, and then I'm
Oh
like, Senna
man.
style, if you no longer go for the gap,
If
and
gap car. If gap
yeah,
car.
yeah, and I just went in there, and I thought, okay, he's probably going to expect me to be in that gap because it's quite a large one, right? But then he takes
Yep.
the normal racing line, and then my mind registers, oh crap, he doesn't know I'm here. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's no way to back out.
Nope.
So what happens? I hit his rear right, and it
Yeah.
spins him off. And then I just hear over the radio, Nick, what was that? Like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, oh, eco hit. So I went the
Yeah.
entire race with the front missing.
Oh.
And race 2 was tough as well because I tried to get an overtake done, hit the brakes a bit too early, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't take enough speed in, and then right at the last moment, my brakes like locked up,
Oh.
and then I just went plowing into Riccardo Romagnoli,
Oh
and
God.
we were out of the race. I mean, at that moment, as it is, usually you always put the blame on other people.
Yeah.
But then I got out of the car and kind of reflected, and I was like, hey, a bit hot headed. A bit hot headed.
Yeah.
So yeah, like
are.
most of the accidents I've had were more like ego accidents and like
Mhm.
putting you back into place rather than like actually getting injured. Like I've genuinely never gotten badly injured in racing, which I'm super thankful for.
Yeah, I'd say the worst injury I had was actually this most recent race in Spain when I sprained my wrist. So thankfully I'm all good. I had a tire hit me in the race car, but I for some reason I was fine in that. So, but yeah, no, this most recent race in Spain was a crazy one for sure. If there was a hard charger award, we definitely should have got it. It was.
I
It was
watched it.
something.
It was pretty nuts. It was pretty nuts. I was trying my best to follow it because I was at my local car track.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I saw the race and I was like, okay, dang, like respect.
Yeah,
Respect.
I mean
that was a good performance.
I mean, we passed 10 cars missing a fender, and then second day we get caught up at the big one, and rip the nose off, rip the both fenders off, racing like a modified, and still managed P12 in podium in junior category. Like it was actually like I told my team, I was like, look, if these are our bad days, like we're gonna be in good shape. Like we're just, I think we're like 1 point out of the top 10 in points or something like that, 1 or 2 points, something stupid like that. Like, and it sucks because we have enough speed to be well into the top 10, but it's just like, I mean, I say all the time, it's like what makes a season is how you handle the bad days, not how many good days you have. And we handled 2 bad days in a row really well. I mean, like I said, we passed 10 cars on the Saturday race and drove from the back in the Sunday race with a destroyed race car that probably should have been DNF'd, and ended up 12th. So can't really beat that.
Definitely can. I feel like that's an absolutely amazing performance. Like I saw it, and I have to say the funniest part was that clip that you posted on Instagram where you're literally just ripping the front bumper off. It's like, just get rid of it. We don't need it.
Nope.
Like,
I mean,
screw it. We got some more drag.
It wasn't even held on. It wasn't even held on anymore. It was better just to rip it off. Like, and the funny thing is, and I've told the story. So I'm going down the straightaways, and every lap, the hood was held on by duct tape, zip ties, and a dream, and it was just progressively getting more and more bent up into my vision. And so, like, as I'm going down the straights, like I eventually start doing this, like to kind of like see. Like I can't really move because I always pull myself down in the seat. So I'm like, eh. And then eventually, finally, it's completely my vision down the straightaways. It'll puff up, and I key up. I think it was lap 8, and I key up and I say, guys, I gotta come in. I can't see. I gotta come in. I can't see my wrist. And also my wrist is sprained, but I'm not feeling it because adrenaline. And I'm like, guys, I need to come in. And then I come out of turn 14, the final corner, and I'm like, I key up. I'm actually going to stay out another lap, try and tough it out. Let me see what this does. As I'm going through the center section of the tracks, I'd say the twisty bit, so like 4, 5, and 6, my team keys up, and they said, Ryan, you are in junior podium position if you stay. And so I keyed up, and I said, Mama didn't raise no bleep. I said, I'm going to finish this race. And down the straightaways, I was using my sight markers out the side. I'd get to the end of the pit road wall going into turn number 1, and I would literally in my head say, one Mississippi break,
To
downshift.
Mississippi.
Then I'd go down the backstretch after turn 6, that little kink into the sweeping left. I literally was like going off of that, and I'd see the curb end, and I was like, all right, I turn in here, and I'd see the curb start, break. Okay, cool, I guessed right. I literally couldn't say
You
in front of
guessed
me.
right. You guessed wrong, you're done. You guessed right, you got it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guessed right a lot of the time, and it was so funny. My spotter Mark and I, we were joking about this after the race, but like during the race, Jimmy Erkley, he pitted. He had an issue or something, so he was coming from the back with the head of steam, and he keys up, and he's like, "Next car behind you is for position. He's catching you," and I'm like, "Is he for the junior podium position?" And he says, "He is for position." And I'm like, "Mark, is it for the junior podium? Tell me if it's for the junior podium." Like I'm yelling, and he was like, "No, he's not for junior podium." So because like I was going to block. I did not care.
Yeah.
I was going to be a menace. I was going to be Ryan Newman. And I like did not care. But he said it wasn't from position. So when he got there, I was like, all right, go by.
Yeah,
So
just like passed through.
yeah, like there. I mean, me blocking him would have done absolutely nothing. He was very much
Literally.
faster than me. I was probably just going to run a defensive lane, and he'd probably go around me on the top because I was slow. So, but regardless, it was a very funny race. And yeah, but I mean, like I said, you know, it was a team effort for sure, right? You know, when you have a race like that and you're able to rebound from, like I said, what should have been a DNF to getting a P12 and a junior podium, I can't, you know, sit here and say it was bad.
Definitely. I mean, I always say when life gives you lemon, make lemonade, like the classic thing you say in that sort of situation. I have to say, like, the days that are the worst, you feel the proudest of yourself. Like, I have to say, last year in Vallelunga, this is something that you can't even really see from the live stream, but you can like hear it on the onboard. So I don't know how it is in your footwell, but with my pedals, like the throttle pedal is connected via this rod to the carburetor with like this little screw, and that screw actually like broke.
Oh no!
So I don't know what caused it to break. Perhaps it was the 80 degrees in the car or something last year, but somehow that screw decides to break. And I got no more throttle, right?
Oh.
And me being me, I'm like you said, I'm not coming in unless I actually have to, right? Like I'm staying out and I'm forcing myself through all this. And I've sprained my ankle probably like a million times. Like I have more paper ankles than Stephen Curry. Like it's bad.
Yeah.
Like it's evil. Like literally, I step wrong and I'm done. Like my ankles are done again. So my feet are super sensitive. But I was like, all right, playing around down there, and I was like, okay, if I press my foot like here, like I can kind of accelerate a little bit. And I figured out that the screw was still there. It was just like off somewhere in the footwell. So I ended up jamming my foot in between the gap of like the pedal box and the throttle pedal. Yeah. And like pressing in the rod to still accelerate. And I went the entire race with that. And then I got third position in the rookie trophy.
Yep.
And I was super proud of myself. And then the next day, there was that entire safety car fiasco where it was pretty much just like 90% safety car.
Yeah.
And like no racing. And I was second. And I felt way more proud with that third position than with the second place on the other day, because you know I really fought for that. And I mean, even though you can't see the live stream, for me it was like it was one of those experiences that was surreal. Like I got out of the car, thinking to myself like, what have I actually just done? Like I went to the podium in my socks because my feet were burning, my right foot was hurting, and I was like, I'm done. Like I'm going to the podium now with my socks on. And then after that, like Martin Dubeck had like this like Spider-Man like kiddie pool like filled with water. I hopped into that pool in my entire racing suit. I was like, I'm done. Like I'm chilling now. I don't care how much this suit stinks after I've hopped into this water. Yeah, I'm doing it now because I fought it, and I deserved it. I've had a bit of trouble with the throttle pedal. Like in Valencia, like I think it was the first race I had. Even the throttle got stuck.
Oh god!
I don't know what turn it was, but like there's this like left-hand turn that like goes downwards. Yeah. And then there's like another left, and then this like super tight right-hander, right? Yep. And that super tight right-hander, I hit the brakes, and the engine RPM sounds really weird. The car keeps pushing, and I'm like, something's off, right? Yeah. So I hit the brakes even harder. The front's locked. The thing's still going straight, and I'm like, oh man, throttle pedal's stuck. So I end up just like completely kicking it until it like springs back,
Oh,
and somehow still making it out. So those days were like probably like the best days for me, even though they were like really bad. Like thinking back
yeah.
to it, it was just like you feel really proud of it. You know?
Yeah, when
Just,
you
just
overcome
compared to a
something,
normal race.
when you overcome something, it's always a sense of pride there.
Definitely, definitely.
Yep.
And yeah, to wrap things up, we've been talking about racing. This is
Hmm.
something that I think a lot of people only dream of. Up
Hmm.
until 2 years ago, I was also just dreaming of it, and
Yeah.
super grateful for the fact that I was able to make my dream a reality. So, what is your advice for people looking to get into racing? And more specifically, what is your advice for people actually getting the budget to race? Because I know I'm not like poor per se, but I don't
Hmm.
come from a family that's got like immense finances, so I struggle
Yep.
to kind of finance the racing,
Absolutely.
which is
I
why
relate.
this year I'm probably going to just participate part time, if even, because
Yeah.
that's the only way I'll be able to make it. So, what is your advice, and what is your advice on getting budget to race?
You know, for those who are just starting out, don't be afraid to start small and build. Like I mentioned, I started Bandoleros and went to street stocks, right? A lot of people, they'd look at that and say that's a crazy, trajectory. But, for me, it made the most sense, right? It was the cheapest option. It made sense financially for my family. Know that, it isn't going to be a cheap endeavor. It's going to be something that you are going to have to put a lot of time and effort and money into to start. But as long as the thing is, you have to be realistic with yourself. You have to be realistic with your family. If you're leaning on your family, um, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're going to run your family or yourself out of money or bankrupt trying to chase a dream that is very, 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 very difficult to chase. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, and that's okay. But if you have the capabilities of doing so, and if you have the knowledge to try and build upon that, then you can do it. Now, finding money to drive race cars, it's all about trying to make sure you build a partnership, build a program that works for everybody involved, not just yourself. Because putting a sticker on a race car don't work. It does not work. I can tell you that right now. Stop pitching a race car and start pitching programs. You're not gonna land a deal pitching a sticker on a race car unless they just want the photos, which is cool. Some people do. Some people do want just photos. And you know what? Good on them. But other than that, 90% of the time, 95, 99% of the time, they don't just want photos. They want to see results. They want to see return on their investment. And it's your job as the driver, and it's your team's job. If you have a team, some people are, fortunate to have a group behind them. I don't, unfortunately. But it's your job to make sure that you attain those goals, and you attain those goals, and are able to complete those objectives, set those marks and be able to do it, because at the end of the day, it has to make sense for everybody. And you need to take the responsibility of building that program and executing it to the fullest potential and being ready to work your balls off for days and days on end. There are going to be 7-day work weeks. There's going to be days where you are not wanting to do something, and you are going to have to stay up until late at night to do better at it, to do better at whether it's running laps on the simulator, whether it's writing up an email, whether it's working until midnight on a pitch deck. But at the end of the day, it's all going to work itself out some way or another. So yeah, that's my thought process there.
That's awesome. I feel like you can also be a philosopher besides just a racing driver. That's probably the best advice
Yeah,
that I've heard on getting into racing. Most people just kind of give the classic, oh, never give up and push hard answer. And yeah, I
I'm
think
a
that
realist,
was
man. I'm a realist.
that's awesome. Like I
I
can I can notice it, and I think it's amazing because
I
like
was this close to
you're really
stopping
getting an
racing.
honest opinion.
I was this close to stopping racing. I was this close because when I was racing late models, my parents sat me down at the table and they were like, "Ryan, we can't do this. We had a sponsor, but they were only putting up so much." My parents, they were like, "Look, we can't do this." And my mom's a kindergarten teacher. My dad's a construction worker, right? So we're not like, kind of like you mentioned earlier. We're not poor by any means. I'm not never going to sit here and cry poor, but I am not going to sit here and say that we were well off. And with us, when my parents sit me down and say we're done racing, we're done racing, and I'm not going to fight that. I remember saying, I was like, cool, hopefully we win the next race and we could put a for sale sign on the car and make some money back. I was okay with it. Like, you have to be willing to be real with yourself. And And that's the number one thing a race car driver needs to be, is real. If you're not going to be real with yourself, you're going to be playing a charade until the very end.
Definitely, and I have to say, I gotta admit, I've had these conversations with my parents as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've told them a million times. I have a younger brother as well, right?
Yeah.
If you guys want to like fund my younger brother because he's got some crazy,
Yeah.
he's way younger. And
Yeah.
if we ever get to the point where we can finance this,
Yeah.
and it's impossible to keep this up,
Yeah.
either I've got to find a way to actually
Yeah.
get the money in,
Then it's your job.
or we're not going to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
precisely. So I've also like been focusing more and more on getting campaigns in.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest issue that I've had is that most businesses, at least in the European market, are afraid when it comes to racing marketing because it's not good for the environment. It's not eco-friendly. We don't want that image, right?
Yeah.
And by far, that's the biggest issue I've had. That and the fact that they see huge sums of money and they say, this sounds like a really cool program. This sounds like something that is absolutely like amazing. But like for us, at least, like right now, we have this and that going on when it comes to marketing. We have these and those programs when it comes to this and that. We don't have the funds for right now. And those are by far the biggest issues I've had.
Yeah.
But I 100% agree with what you said. You just got to keep pushing, keep going, and just see where it takes you, and always be a realist with yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said too, you know, those partners that may not be able to do it today, they may be able to do it next year. They may not be able to come to you and say, hey, we can't do the full car, but we could do a small sticker. We could work a small deal. You know what I mean? Small deals are arguably just as important as the bigger ones. You know what I mean? Because every little deal adds up to being able to drive a race car. So, and that's how you need to take these deals as well as any racer, yourself or any other racer that may be listening to this. You need to treat every partnership like it's a big deal, because it's allowing you to go and drive a race car. So yeah, that's my philosophy. You have to treat every partner, you have to treat every partnership, with the most respect, the most effort, and you have to be willing to work to obtain the goals that you are trying to set forth.
Precisely. I feel like one has to look at it as, I'm not just doing this for myself, but I'm doing this so that I can fulfill my dream and to actually help someone fulfill their dream.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the best way of getting funding in and making racing possible.
Yep, 1000%.
Awesome. So I'd say that was an absolutely dope and I guess motivational end to the podcast.
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it, Ryan. It was absolutely amazing having you on board. Thanks for your time, man. It was really fun.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, man. Hope to see you at the track soon. And we'll, like I said, just really good time talking.
Definitely, man. Hopefully we'll see each other on track this season, and we might be able to fight with each other.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Awesome. So in that case, thanks for the podcast. Guys, peace out. Stay tuned for the next episodes coming up. I'll try my best to keep things posted. Things are difficult with timing right now, but just balancing university and all the other stuff going on in life. But such is life, eh? That's just what you gotta do. Awesome.